Welcome to the Confessional Booth. I'm your host, Marie Wagner. I am a certified sex, love, and relationship coach, as well as a hands-on de-armoring practitioner. The Confessional Booth is a safe space where we bring voice to what has been hidden, where we explore the things that shape us beneath the surface. And it's a place where shame and other internal blockages begin to lose their grip. As a result, we can start to experience more freedom, energy, joy, pleasure, and to ultimately feel more fully ourselves. Let's begin. There is something very interesting that happens when we begin talking about love, because most of us think we know what it means to love someone. We know how to give, we know how to take care of people. We know how to show up. We know how to anticipate someone's needs, solve problems, make dinner, send the text, remember the birthday, support the career, listen to the story, hold someone when they're having a difficult day. We can become extraordinarily good at giving love. And yet, for many people, receiving love is much more complicated. Someone tells you that they love you, and instead of allowing yourself to really take it in, you make a joke of it. Someone compliments you, and you immediately explain why they're wrong, or you justify it in some way, or you kind of brush it off. Someone wants to take care of you, and you become uncomfortable. Someone looks at you with genuine affection. Rather than relaxing into it, something inside you starts asking questions. What do they want? Do they really mean it? What happens when they change their mind? What am I supposed to give back in return? How long is this going to last? And sometimes underneath all of those questions, there is something even deeper. Can I actually let someone love me without having to earn it? That is a very different question. And I think it is one of the most important questions we can ask ourselves as we move into this part of our conversation about releasing shame. Because shame does not only tell us that certain parts of ourselves are unacceptable. Sometimes shame tells us that we are fundamentally unworthy of receiving, unworthy of care, unworthy of pleasure, unworthy of attention, unworthy of being chosen. And when that belief becomes embedded in the nervous system, receiving can actually feel threatening. That may sound strange. We usually think of love as something that should make us feel safe. But if your nervous system learned early in life that closeness comes with conditions, unpredictability, criticism, abandonment, obligation, or disappointment, then intimacy itself can become complicated. The body begins asking a very reasonable question. Is it safe to let this person close? And that question doesn't necessarily arrive as a conscious thought. It can arrive as a sensation. For example, your chest tightening or your stomach contracting or your breathing becoming shallow. You may feel an urge to pull away, or you may become restless and wanting to avoid it. You suddenly need to do something. You start cleaning the kitchen. I can definitely relate to that. You check your phone, you make a joke, you change the subject. You can also become sexual. You become intellectual. You try to explain it from a mental or logical perception. You become busy. You find a way to move away from the vulnerability of simply receiving what is being offered. And I think this is where the nervous system gives us an incredibly important piece of the puzzle. because receiving requires a certain degree of openness. And openness requires enough safety that the body does not feel the need to protect itself. Stephen Porges's work around the autonomic nervous system and neuroception helps us understand this. Our nervous system is constantly scanning the environment for cues of safety and danger, often without conscious awareness. When we encounter someone who feels safe, our social engagement system can become more available. Our face and facial muscles soften, our eyes can become more expressive, our voice becomes more nuanced, our breathing becomes easier, our heart and respiratory rhythms become more coordinated. We can orient toward another person rather than constantly monitoring them. We can listen, we can receive, we can experience touch, we can experience pleasure, we can become curious, and perhaps most importantly, we can allow ourselves to be affected by another person. And this last part is very important. You see, receiving love means allowing something outside of ourselves to affect us. And if you have spent years learning to be self-sufficient, controlled, independent, or hyper-competent, that can feel incredibly vulnerable. I see this particularly with people who have built their identity around being strong, and I see it in myself as well. The person everyone calls when something goes wrong, the person who always has the answer, the person who takes care of everyone else. The person who has learned that being needed is a reliable way of feeling valuable. They genuinely love taking care of people, but sometimes there is another layer underneath it. If I am the one giving, I don't have to be the one needing. If I'm the one helping, I don't have to be vulnerable. If I'm the one holding everyone else, I don't have to let anyone hold me. And that can become a very sophisticated form of protection. Counselor and shame expert John Bradshaw, his work is around shame and is useful here because shame often creates a sense that there is something fundamentally wrong with us. If I believe there is something wrong with me, then receiving love creates a contradiction. Someone is saying, I see you, I value you, I want you, I love you. And the internal response is, if you really knew me, you wouldn't. So the nervous system starts looking for evidence that the love isn't real. They'll leave. They don't really mean it. They're only saying that because they want something. I'm too much. I'm not enough. I'm going to disappoint them. Eventually, they'll discover who I really am. This is one of the ways shame protects itself. It keeps the evidence of worthiness out. Because if you genuinely allow yourself to receive love, then the old identity begins to become less believable. And sometimes we hold on to old identities because they are familiar, even when they are painful. Carl Jung's work on the shadow is very relevant here. There are parts of ourselves we have learned to reject. And sometimes receiving love means allowing another person to see those parts without immediately trying to hide them. This can be profoundly uncomfortable. Think about the person who is very confident professionally, but deeply insecure physically. Their partner tells them they are beautiful. Instead of receiving it, they say, you have to say that, or you haven't seen me first thing in the morning, or you don't really mean that. The compliment isn't landing. The person isn't receiving the words because their internal identity has already decided that the words cannot be true. And this is where I think we need to understand the difference between hearing something and receiving it. Hearing is cognitive, receiving is embodied. You can hear, I love you, and intellectually understand the sentence. Receiving it is different. Receiving it means allowing the information to move through your system, allowing your body to soften around it, allowing yourself to feel the warmth, allowing yourself to be touched emotionally by another person's affection, letting yourself believe even for a moment this is real. And that can be surprisingly difficult. Brené Brown has spent so much of her work exploring vulnerability, shame, and the difficulty of allowing ourselves to be seen. One of the ideas I find particularly relevant here is her distinction between vulnerability and weakness. Vulnerability requires uncertainty. You don't know what is going to happen. And receiving love contains uncertainty. Because when you allow yourself to really receive someone, you also become aware that you could lose them. That is part of the bargain. If I never let you matter to me, I never have to experience the vulnerability of losing you. If I never fully open, I never have to fully grieve. And so some people keep love at arm's length because distance feels safer than attachment. This can become especially complicated in romantic and sexual relationships. You might desperately want intimacy while simultaneously becoming uncomfortable when someone gets close. You might pursue someone intensely and then lose interest when they reciprocate. You might want to be desired but become uncomfortable when someone actually sees your body. You might want affection but tense when someone touches you gently. You may want your partner to initiate sex but then feel pressure once they do. And these contradictions can be confusing, but they make sense when we understand the nervous system. Desire involves movement toward. Protection involves movement away. And sometimes both systems are active at the same time. So part of you is saying, come closer. Another part is saying, that's enough. This is not necessarily evidence that you don't love someone. Not at all. It can be evidence that intimacy activates both your attachment system and your protection system. And that is something we can work with. Layla Martin's work around feminine embodiment, pleasure, polarity, and receiving offers another useful lens here. One of the ideas she explores is the capacity to receive pleasure rather than constantly trying to produce or control the experience. And although her work often speaks specifically to sexuality and feminine embodiment, I think and know the principle extends much further. Receiving requires a willingness to slow down enough to notice what is already happening. You cannot fully receive while simultaneously managing the experience. You cannot fully receive a compliment while preparing your rebuttal. You cannot fully receive affection while wondering what you owe in return. You cannot fully receive pleasure while monitoring whether you are doing it correctly. And you certainly cannot fully receive love while trying to control whether the other person will continue loving you. This is one of the places where sexuality becomes such a powerful teacher. Imagine someone touching you affectionately, not sexually, just touching you. A hand on your back, a kiss on your forehead, someone holding your face, someone looking into your eyes. For some people, that creates a beautiful sense of safety. For others, the body immediately becomes alert. The shoulders rise, the abdomen tightens, the breath stops, the mind becomes busy, the pelvis freezes, and the brain is saying, what do they want? What happens next? Do I need to respond? Are they expecting sex? Am I disappointing them? And suddenly, something that could have been nourishing turns into a performance. The body is moved out of receiving and into monitoring. This is why I often talk about presence when I talk about sexuality. Presence is physiological. You cannot simply decide to be present if your nervous system is scanning for danger. Presence requires enough regulation that the brain can widen its attention. The prefrontal cortex can remain engaged. Sensory information can be processed without being immediately categorized as threatening. The parasympathetic nervous system can support restoration and social connection. The muscles can soften, the breath can move, and pleasure becomes more accessible because the body isn't spending all of its energy protecting itself. This is also where Andrew Huberman's work around dopamine becomes relevant to the conversation we had in the previous episode about desire. Dopamine is deeply involved in motivation and pursuit. It helps us move towards something. But there is another part of the experience that we don't always talk about. What happens when we finally get there? What happens when someone loves us? What happens when someone gives us exactly what we said we wanted? Can we stay? Can we receive? Can we allow the nervous system to settle into the experience rather than immediately creating another goal? For some people, pursuit is easier than receiving. The chase is easier than being chosen. Achievement is easier than being cared for. Seduction is easier than intimacy. Performance is easier than surrender, and that is worth paying attention to. Robert Greene writes extensively about seduction, attraction, anticipation, and the dynamics of pursuit. And while his work is often framed through power and interpersonal strategy, there's another question we can take from it. What happens when the pursuit ends? Because attraction can create enormous energy. Anticipation can be intoxicating. The uncertainty can be stimulating. But intimacy asks something different. Intimacy asks us to remain present when there is no longer anything to prove. It asks us to let ourselves be known. And for someone with a strong shame structure, that can be much more vulnerable than being desired from a distance. James Hollis, Jungian psychoanalyst, talks about the movement toward a more authentic life, and I think receiving love is part of that work because it requires us to examine the identities we have constructed around worth. Maybe your identity has been, I am the strong one, I am the successful one, I am the independent one, I am the sexy one. I am the one who takes care of everyone. I am the one who doesn't need anything. Those identities may have served you beautifully, but eventually we have to ask, who am I when I don't have to perform my worth? Who am I when someone loves me simply because I am here? Who am I when I allow myself to need? Who am I when I allow myself to receive? That is where the spiritual dimension of this conversation begins to emerge. Because there is something deeply humbling about receiving. Giving allows us to maintain a certain amount of control. But receiving asks us to trust, and trust requires uncertainty. It asks us to let something good happen without immediately trying to secure it, repay it, control it, or prove that we deserve it. There is a soft kind of surrender in that. And I don't mean surrender as giving away your boundaries or your discernment. I mean surrender as allowing yourself to experience something without needing to manage every aspect of it. So, how do we actually practice receiving? Start very small. The next time someone compliments you, instead of explaining why they're wrong, simply say, "Thank you," and then notice your body. Does your chest tighten? Do you feel heat in your face? Do you want to laugh? Do you want to change the subject? Can you take just one slow breath and allow yourself to remain there for another 5 seconds? That is practice. If someone offers to help you and your automatic response is, "I'm fine," pause and ask yourself, am I actually fine or am I uncomfortable receiving? And perhaps just once, let them help. Notice what happens. If your partner tells you they love you, resist the urge to immediately say it back. Let yourself hear it. Let yourself feel what happens inside your body when someone offers you love. If affection makes you tense, don't force yourself to relax. Instead, notice the tension. Feel your feet, slow your exhale, allow your eyes to soften. Let your body discover that receiving does not require immediate performance. And in sexual intimacy, practice receiving without making yourself responsible for your partner's experience. Allow yourself to feel, allow yourself to be touched, allow yourself to say what feels good and to say what doesn't feel good. And allow yourself to change your mind. Receiving is not passive. Receiving requires presence and discernment. It requires enough self-trust to know what you are allowing in. And ultimately, I think this is where releasing shame takes us. We begin with the question, what's wrong with me? And eventually we arrive somewhere very different. Can I let myself experience what is good? Can I allow love to reach me? Can I allow pleasure to reach me? Can I allow someone to care for me without immediately earning it or feeling the need to pay it back? Can I allow myself to be seen without editing everything that someone sees? Can I let my body experience safety? Can I let my nervous system learn that closeness does not always mean danger? Because psychologically, receiving love begins to challenge the old beliefs about worth. Emotionally, it allows tenderness, affection, gratitude, joy, and vulnerability to move through us. And physiologically, it can shift us toward greater parasympathetic regulation, greater social engagement, and a body that is more available for intimacy and pleasure. And spiritually, there is something even deeper. We begin to understand that perhaps our worth was never something we had to earn in the first place. Maybe we were never supposed to spend our entire lives proving that we deserved to be loved. Maybe part of healing is learning how to stop bracing against the very thing we have been longing for. And perhaps receiving love is one of the most courageous things we can learn to do. Because when you truly receive, you allow yourself to be affected, to be touched. You allow yourself to matter. And eventually, you allow yourself to believe that you don't have to become someone else in order to be worthy of what you have been longing for all along. This is the Confessional Booth. If you like this episode, please rate it and subscribe. and refer it to anyone you know who may benefit. To find out more about what I offer, head over to my website, mariewagner.ca, on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn at Marie Wagner, and on Instagram at the Marie Wagner Coach. Thanks for being here. See you in the next episode.